Hi, I'm Amanda Jane Woodall and welcome to my fashion school. So today we're going to be learning about the rise, fall and rebirth of one of the most controversial British designers. It's John Galliano. John Charles Galliano was born on the 28th of November 1960 and raised in the British territory of Gibraltar. His father was a plumber who was native to the area and his mother was a Spanish flamenco dancer. And they moved to Britain, to the south of the country, when John was just 6 years old in search of better employment opportunities. His strict Roman Catholic upbringing meant he was a shy and timid boy, but he always showed a real flair for drawing. And he attended the Wilson Grammar School for Boys, and his mother liked to dress him really very elegantly, and this caused a lot of bullying from his peers. He went on to study languages at the East London College, where he took a subsidiary course in life drawing. And this is where his talent for illustration was discovered, with his teachers suggesting that he create a portfolio so that he could apply for the foundation course at the very famous art school Central St Martin's. He was awarded his place in 1983, where he met like-minded creatives who were part of the era's pop culture scene, and it was a time for flamboyance and extravagance in dressing, and they would all dress up really creatively at the weekends and attend the London club scene. He discovered his love for fashion designing through his work in fashion illustration, and he was awarded a first-class honours for his fashion degree, and his graduate collection was called Les Incroyables, and this was based on the slashed clothing worn post-French Revolution. And this collection so impressed the fashion industry that it was sold in Brown's boutique in London. And his first ever client was Diana Ross, who bought one of his coats. He launched his own fashion label named Galliano's Girl with the help of stylist Amanda Harleck and milliner Stephen Jones. And although his designs were always well received, he was not a good business mind, and this led to financial difficulty and eventual bankruptcy that saw him lose all of his financial backing. He decided to move on to Paris so that he could perfect his skills and get his name out in the global market. And this led to a meeting with creative director of Plain Sud Moroccan Faisal Amour, who was kind to John, and he lent him his resources so that John could show at Paris Fashion Week in 1989. However, fashion careers are notoriously expensive, and he just needed more support in the industry. And luckily, he was taken on board by American Vogue legends Anna Wintour and Andre Leon Talley, and they noticed a high society interest in John Galliano's fantasy creations. Seu Schlumberger was a Portuguese socialite who promoted John in the high society community, and this even included her lending John her very grand manor house to throw his first fashion show, and also she paid top models so that they would walk for him. In 1994, Swiss investment banker John Abelt rescued Galliano's career, and he financially gave him the opportunity to open an atelier near Place de la Bastille in Paris. And this coincided with Bernard Arnault of LVMH, wanting to revamp his luxury brands for a younger clientele. He appointed John Galliano as the head designer at Givenchy, and this was very uncomfortable for Parisians who were not used to the British flamboyance, which was a long way away from classic French elegance. However, John was an intellectual and he used his historical knowledge to go back into the archives, re-examine the clothing and reinvent it in his style, but still following the strict house codes. In 1996, he was appointed as designer-in-chief at Christian Dior, a brand with a rich, decadent history in the revolution of women's clothing. John was well received at Dior for his haute couture and his ready-to-wear collections, although some critics would argue that actually John was too young to be representing such a fine name in fashion, and with hindsight, perhaps some of the criticisms would prove right later on. John Galliano was a storyteller who created romantic narratives in his fashion design, and during his 15 years at the helm of the company, he rebranded Dior into high-octane haute couture. He developed high artistry in fashion design, inspired by eccentric muses and historical references, and he pushed the boundaries on using culture in his design work. He was inspired by African, Asian, and European heritage. He created dream-like stage presentations of his collections, and he taught his models to behave theatrically. They used their faces and their bodies to create a character for each piece of clothing. He worked alongside Orlando Pitt, who was a hairdresser, and makeup artist Pat McGrath, who helped create this very notable look of these character creatures who really broadened the imagination and led to some escapism. House codes that were created by John Galliano for Dior were deconstructed leather pieces, parachute dresses, extreme femininity, and voluminous structural garments. He reimagined the collections of beloved designers like Vivienne Westwood and Charles James, which led to his final collection for Dior being inspired by illustrator René Gruau. With garments representing the new look from the 40s and 50s, he referenced René Gruau's masterpieces through the construction of the garments, and this was a technical challenge for the atelier as they had to capture light and shade through the folding of fabric. John was celebrated as a genius in fashion design, and he got on with absolutely everybody that he worked with, and he collected many awards. He collected the British Designer Award on numerous occasions, and he achieved the French Legion highest honour in 2010. Galliano's reputation would be devastated in 2011 when he was suspended from Dior, rightly for anti-Semitic hate speech. He was arrested and prosecuted on the 8th of September 2011 and ordered to pay €6,000 in fines. His company also had to pay €1.17 million to Dior for damage to their reputation, and he was stripped of his French honours. He had been caught on camera blackout drunk, making vile racist public comments. And this led to him being sent to Arizona rehab for a mental health and addiction crisis. It was the opinion of Galliano supporters that he had been very unwell during this incident. And although he had no recollection of what he had said, he knew he had to atone for his crime. He needed to give back to the fashion industry, and so he went to offer masterclasses to fashion students in London and New York. And he spent time with the Jewish community because he needed to relearn his attitudes and re-establish a relationship. This was a learning curve for the industry fashion leaders who knew that the pressures they had cast on their young designers had led them to suffer extreme mental health and addiction problems. Alexander McQueen, a contemporary of Galliano, had ended his own life in 2010, and so the industry had to do what they could to save John Galliano from the same fate. In 2014, Maison Margiela appointed John Galliano as his successor at Maison Margiela. He had left the company in 2009 and had ordered that it be run as a collective, with every designer wearing a lab coat to mark their uniformity. In 2015, Galliano made his first collection for Maison Margiela, and this included deconstructed coats that were draped into dresses and illusion style pockets where, when the hand was placed into the pocket, it looked like a cuff. He re-evaluated his use of colour, using red, black and Hessian to depict light, shade and nature. And he allowed the audience in on the development of the garments by showing his rough work and toiles on the runway. His work at Margiela is subdued and humble, a world away from the attention-seeking, eccentric John Galliano of his early career. Could this be the acknowledgement that John Galliano needed to change from somebody who desired celebrity to somebody who had a quiet, remorseful presence and just showed his best work? Amazingly, Maison Margiela gave John Galliano a second chance, and I really hope that he can regulate his behaviour in order to honour that. So we have come to the end of this video, but I will see you again in my follow-up video when we'll be looking at another British eccentric. He developed